I know we are already in April and that I am awfully late to the party, more like the party has been over for days and even the mess has already been cleaned up. But I am a man of my word and I said I was going to make a list of my favorite games of 2025, so a list I will make. Let's talk about this list. There are a couple of games that I just didn't have the time to tell you about last year, and yet some others to which I didn't do justice, even if my reviews were positive. Then there were some titles that I gushed over ceaselessly last year that are going to yet again be brought up, because they are that fucking good. But this time, for your viewing convenience, I am going to stick to the things that ultimately landed them on this list. There were just too many games in 2025 that I enjoyed thoroughly, but I think the top 5 picks of the year are significantly better than the rest of the titles, so pay special attention to those. And because there were so many, let's start with a few honorable mentions. Hell Is Us. Hell Is Us was one of the most pleasant surprises of the last year. It features great production values, phenomenal ambiance, great music, a surprisingly beefy character progression system, and a decent array of combat skills and weapons. Even if combat itself isn't stellar. It tells a decent story and it features interesting characters. On top of that, it doesn't hold your hand and there are no traces of the post-2016 disease that has been taking over entertainment in the last decade. Combat feels a little bit detached from the rest of the gameplay, there are too many enemies and they all look similar, and some NPCs and quests are a bit on the fetch questy side. But this is an immersive, high production title that's worth playing all the way through. Forever Skies. Yet another Olympic diploma for this title. While I might have found the farming aspect of Forever Skies a little too cheap and easy to abuse, the world-building aspect of the game and the way in which it plays into the story, making the world feel dangerous and the stakes of your mission high, makes this one of the best titles of 2025 in my opinion. Also, navigating the world with your custom-made flying stronghold and the experience of having to take breaks in the middle of nowhere to wait out a storm because you couldn't see jack shit, that was just an incomparable experience in 2025. The unexpected high-tension plot twists in the story, the 2 endings that you can get, and the feeling of adventure that you get all the way through made of Forever Skies one of the most enjoyable experiences for me in the last year. Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree. I really did comb through the games that I played in 2025 to fish out the most memorable games and the most memorable gaming experiences. I had a love-hate relationship with Mandragora.
You have a love-hate relationship with everything.
And there were many things that didn't work for me in this title. Unlocking the skills that you actually used in combat by killing enemies and progressing the story rather than by leveling up and putting points in a talent tree was probably my least favorite thing about it. Also, the fact that your talents didn't really modify the way in which you used these skills in combat was a bit of a letdown. These 2 things made the build aspect of that game a little bit frustrating, because I had to wait until I was 3/4 of the way in for my build to finally work the way it was intended. Corpse runs, instant deaths by falling onto spikes, and those ethereal levels that you were forced to complete in a limited time also contributed to fuel the hate aspect of my relationship with this game. But in the end, love won for me in this title. Gorgeous, immersive and inspired visuals, tight responsive combat, absolutely fantastic NPCs with colorful stories, a story that was better than it had any right to be, non-mandatory locations filled with loot and secrets, including secret bosses. These things far outweighed the bad stuff for me. Also, I replayed the game to see if I could get a different ending by choosing different dialogue options, and to see if a different choice of class would result in a different experience. And I was not disappointed. I played the game 2.5 in a row, and I was thoroughly invested all the way through in every run. And that's something that I can say of precious few games lately. Keeper. Keeper is a brilliant game in just about every respect. The story is exciting and thought-provoking, the visuals are eye-popping, and the gameplay is varied and entertaining all the way through. And when the music shines, which isn't always, admittedly, boy does it shine. This game also features interesting replay value, which is something that the walking simulator / puzzle solving genre isn't exactly known for. If this game didn't make it to the top 10, it's because the way in which it explains its mechanics spoils some of the puzzles, and because the camera and controls aren't as tight as they could have been. But other than that, this is definitely one of the titles that stood out to me the most in 2025. But those are just the honorable mentions. Here are my top 10 games of 2025. Number 10. Dispatch. Whether or not Dispatch is gamey enough to be considered a game is a discussion that I am going to avoid like a 40-year-old Karen avoids decent literature. But I had a blast with this title to the point that I played it twice in a row. So because the ending that I got in the first playthrough wasn't entirely to my liking, and I was invested enough in the story and the characters, and confident enough that things would have turned out differently if I had taken different decisions, I embarked upon the journey a second time. Good story, good characters, and player agency rank very high in the list of things that I want in my games. Dispatch delivers on all of these things, but it also has great visuals, a very strong artistic personality, and extraordinary voice acting, including what in my opinion was the best performance of the year. I don't know how Alana and Charlie got casted for this game, along with Laura Bailey, Matt Mercer, and Aaron Paul, but good for them, I guess.
Not the best impression, but
I was expecting this game to be an unmitigated display of
fucking current day Californian shit!
But I barely said,
Oh man, you Californians.
Yep, Dispatch was a good time in 2025. Number 9, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I owe you a full review of this game, and if I'm honest with you, I haven't been able to even finish it, but so far this game delivers on all the things you expect from a sequel to Kingdom Come Deliverance, namely the immersion aspect of the RPG experience and the massive scope of the campaign. Kingdom Come Deliverance was not my favorite RPG back in the day. I wasn't crazy about how all the freedom that you had in the game didn't exactly translate into multiple different outcomes or proper emergent gameplay the way I like it. It felt a little bit frustratingly constrained. But if there is one thing you can't accuse this game of is lack of immersion. Holy shit, do they knock that shit out of the park when it comes to that. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is no different. I think the game is deceptively smart. The main story, the quests, the characters that you meet along the way. On one hand, none of these things feel extraordinary in any way, but all of them feel grounded in verisimilitude and larger than the part they play in Henry's story. And this is what makes of Kingdom Come Deliverance a delightfully immersive experience. Combat has been improved, if only marginally. New mechanics have been added, the world is now bigger, and I think they found a very clever way to get those who didn't play the first game up to speed with the most relevant events of the first game. I still find the lack of proper emergent gameplay frustrating, but overall, I like where this is going. I am only a couple of dozen hours in so far, but I see myself playing this game all the way through to the end. And though my opinion might still change for better or worse, this was good stuff in 2025, it will be continued in 2026. Number 8. Cybernight's Flashpoint. I had only played Cybernight's Flashpoint for about 30 hours when I talked about it in my video about RPGs that did do it for me in 2025. And now, 130 hours later, and after finishing the retirement mission and getting the customary succession of Fallout-like stills that tell the story of what became of the world, my companions, and my characters after I retired, I am thoroughly convinced that, as good as I said this game was, I didn't do it justice. Many of my most memorable moments in gaming in 2025 came out of this title, surviving a hold the line moment in dire conditions for several turns, making it out alive of a successful assassination mission after a couple of critical mistakes, breaking that business partner out of a dire situation after I found out that she lied about very important details, meticulously picking a place clean in a mission that wasn't even about stealing. This game was intense, man, I tell you. I originally described Cybernight's Flashpoint as a game that sits somewhere in between Shadowrun Hong Kong and Phoenix Point, but I'd say you would need to throw in a generous portion of Invisible Ink to get the whole picture, because stealth and secondary objectives are important in this game. The Trees brothers knew the type of game they wanted to make, and they borrowed just the right mechanics and features they needed from some of the most iconic first-in-class games in different genres to make it. Cybernight's Flashpoint's character creation and progression system is my favorite out of the games that I played in 2025. You get to create your main character, but then you also get to create your initial party of mercs. And it's designed this way because the story revolves around the main character. He or she is the shot caller, the one who has all the important conversations, the guy or gal who has to lead the charge in the most important story missions. And when you get to that Fallout-esque succession of stills in the end, it's your main character's story that goes down in history. But the game also wants you to create your initial party of mercs with their own talents and backgrounds, and to give you full control over your group to get those role-playing juices flowing from the get-go. You also create your own intel guy, a non-combatant character with his own unique talent tree with non-combat skills that make you better at managing your facility or your crew, or at negotiating better missions and deals. You get to customize your character's attributes, backgrounds, traits, initial loadout, initial implant, initial set of skills. You and your companions have class-specific talent trees in which some active skills have 2 or 3 avenues of progress, and you can multi-class. There are different types of armors and weapons with strengths and weaknesses that make them ideal for some missions and an absolute liability for others. You've different tiers of set weapons that you can access by learning blueprints, and you get those by going out of your way to loot lockers and hack computers during the various missions of the game. There are weapon mods, there are implants that give you super powerful bonuses that come with dire trade-offs, and all of this is fantastic. The most impressive thing about Cybernight's Flashpoint is that the typical broad array of moving parts that you usually get in a Trees Brothers game finally feels like a complex system of interdependent mechanics and features, and heists are front and center of it all. You go out on a mission that's about killing someone, but you take a hacker with you because you're a loot whore, and digital loot is a lot juicier than physical loot, and you steal some accounts. So because you like Taylor's Trizek, you sell these accounts to her instead of other buyers. The info in these accounts gives her power and leverage over other people, so her influence grows. You keep selling her accounts because you like her and because she deals in cybernetic implants. And of course, the more she trusts you, the better the implants she's willing to sell. And you just so happen to favor those as a way to improve your mercs as opposed to other stuff like guns or favors, which are other contact specialties. Also, the more you help her, the more likely she is to trust you with unique story missions that pay very extremely well, which will in turn help you build rooms faster in your stronghold, rooms that you can dedicate to crafting, intel, storage, medical service, etc. And those will in turn make your mercs more powerful and your missions easier. It's a beautiful system of mechanics. None of them feel like an afterthought. All of them are rewarding, and all of them play a part in your long-term strategy, and even in the way you approach each individual heist. Cybernight's Flashpoint is not perfect, not by a long shot. Your companions have personal quests and character-specific backgrounds, but no personality to speak of. And I think this was a wasted opportunity because these guys aren't entirely procedurally generated. They could have thrown in a bit of personality to make them feel more human. The things they say during the missions are either random or tied to their class. They are not specific to them as individuals. Same thing happens when they are assigned to legwork missions. The things they say are specific to the mission and not to their characters. And this makes them feel more like disposable tactical assets rather than actual characters. And it's a pity because they were so close to nailing this. They could have been the first game to reach that sweet, sweet spot that I've always craved of highly configurable companions that also feel like people. Speaking of dialogue, it's dense and repetitive, and many story missions revolve around objectives in which there is nothing personal at stake for the main character. In some cases, the things that are at stake don't even feel that important in the grand scheme of things. I'm looking at you, Daedalus block missions. Also, unfortunately, I kinda sandwiched this game between 2 other titles that take place in futuristic cyberpunk-themed settings, The Ascent and Showgunners, and those happen to have fantastic production values. And not just technically, they both nail the cyberpunk atmosphere and vibe. They have amazing music, especially The Ascent, and the fuck yeah factor of visual and sound effects is off the charts, especially in Showgunners. I know this might be an unfair comparison, but those games look and feel the way I would have wanted Cyberpunk's Flashpoint to look and feel like. Because in most other respects, particularly gameplay, I consider Cyberknights to be the superior game by far. Still, of the games on this list, this is probably one of the only 2 that I would consider to bring with me to that famous deserted island to which you can only bring a handful of games because you won't ever have access to new ones. I might make a video about that, by the way. And one reason I may consider Cyberknights as an island title is that these guys keep adding new things to the game almost faster than I can go through them. And it's good stuff. We're talking new enemies, new locations, new types of missions, new classes, new quality of life improvements. This game was not only one of the best games of 2025, but I can also safely predict that it's going to get even better over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. Number 7. Shinobi, The Art of Vengeance. It takes a nod to an old-time favorite of mine for me to pick up a side-scrolling platformer of all things. And last year we had a few of those begging me to pick them up. For some reasons, devs decided that 2025 was the year to pay tribute to 2 of the most popular ninja games from the late 80s and early 90s. One of those games was Shinobi, The Art of Vengeance. When I heard that this game was scheduled to come out in 2025, I became immediately interested. Then I learned that the game was being developed by Lizard Cube, the same guys who gave us Streets of Rage 4. And that made me say,
"Gentlemen, you had my curiosity. Now you have my attention."
But then I saw the footage and my attention quickly became excitement. But then I played the game. And I tell you, it's not every day that a game of which I have high expectations ends up surpassing all of them. Shinobi, The Art of Vengeance features the most satisfying combat that I experienced in 2025, and it's not even a question. The combos were exciting and fun to pull off, and the way in which the game introduces new skills and moves is brilliant. I know I'm a slow learner and a clumsy old fart, and that's why my go-to strategy is to learn the 2 things that work best for me and use that shit until it doesn't work. But Shinobi is so well designed that I immediately saw value in every move and attack that I learned, and I ended up using almost all those moves and attacks consistently. Also, I know that some people weren't crazy about the Metroidvania or the puzzle elements of Shinobi, The Art of Vengeance, but I loved them. I loved every wild design choice that departed from the original formula, as well as the things that came back as newer, cooler versions of the original rendition. I 100%ed every area in the game, including Rift and anti-Old Man reflex platforming sections. I unlocked and defeated the secret boss and even went back to many levels after I had 100%ed them to play them in arcade mode. Hell, I even milked the boss rush mode for hours after I had completed the game. Shinobi, The Art of Vengeance was a blast, and I just couldn't put it down until I finished it. Easy pick for this list. Number 6. Citizen Sleeper 2. Citizen Sleeper 2 improves upon its predecessor in almost every respect. To me, this is a textbook example of how to make a sequel. You build upon the first game's mechanics to add new mechanics and features. New mechanics and features that fans of the genre want in the game. Citizen Sleeper 2 introduced companions, missions that work like actual quests, a spaceship that works as both your means of transportation and your stronghold, and a palpable sense of danger of the bad guy being always hot on your tail. This is an RPG in which NPCs feel like actual people who have a life beyond the thing they want you to do. Stakes keep getting higher at every turn, and your choices have an impact on the outcome. Citizen Sleeper 2 ticks almost every box of the RPG Christmas list, and it does so in a way that is unique. The game is not perfect though, and I can see some of you cringing at some of the game's modern day-isms. You can check out my video on RPGs that did it for me in 2025 to see what I'm talking about, but in this video I'm talking about the games that I enjoyed the most in 2025. And this was another one of those games that I just couldn't put down, and I think that's always a very good sign. Now, these were all good games in my book, and they gave me some of my favorite gaming moments in 2025. But these next games were something else. These upcoming 5 titles are my Mount Rushmore of gaming of 2025. These titles could have been in the top 10 of any year in the 2020s so far. So without further ado, let's get to them. Number 5, Death Howl. Death Howl is a card battler with hauntingly beautiful art, thought-provoking narrative, and impeccable user experience in which you step into the shoes of Ro, a mother who lost her child under circumstances that she deems unfair, and it's now dead set on bringing him back from the spirit world before he's lost forever. Driven with great purpose, Ro embarks upon a journey through desolate icy steppes, sinister shadowy realms, and vermin-riddled forests, seeking the aid of larger-than-life spirits who wield otherworldly powers in the hopes that they'll help her come closer to her goal. She'll also have to wrestle with a mysterious voice that seems all hell-bent on leading her astray. But Who does this voice belong to, and why does it want her to fail? Now, I know many of you cringe at the very mention of the words card battler or deck builder. I know some of you dipped your toes in the genre out of curiosity. You like the way in which CRPGs challenge your tactical capabilities. You love that there is a build aspect to your character's progression in this genre, and you love that you usually get the chance to come up with your own plan to take on the game's challenges. But there just don't seem to be enough CRPGs out there to sate your thirst, or you are not always ready to embark upon a 180-hour plus Lord of the Ring-esque adventure. For all these reasons, card battlers looked like something you could be interested in. They look more streamlined than your average CRPG, more combat focused, maybe lacking in the story department, perhaps not concerned enough about immersion, and the approach to some mechanics looked a little bit too utilitarian for your taste. But strategy, tactics, builds, synergies, and enemies that challenge your aptitude to make all of these things work together seem to be the staples of the genre, so why not give it a spin, right? But some of you promptly crashed with the crude reality that most of these games are RLDBs, roguelike deck builders that is. And you positively do not like that in most of them you can't edit your deck however you want and whenever you want. You don't like that you can't save scum your way through combat encounters, and that losing means starting over from scratch. And you don't like all or nothing fights. You don't like them because you earned the right to be there. You defeated everything that came before, so you shouldn't be forced to go over every fight that you have already bested just because you lost that one fight. Especially when the fight that you lost, you could have easily won if you had been given the chance to try again with a few minor adjustments. And there is something about not having a character that you can move around the setting when you're outside of combat. Some of you just need that. Doesn't matter if it's a first person, over the shoulder, or isometric perspective, you just need to move a character around.
Am I right? Or am I right?
Well, I think many of you will be happy to hear that Howl is not a roguelike or a roguelite. If I had to compare it to another card battler, or rather to another game that uses card battler mechanics for its combat, I'd say Howl is more akin to Black Book. You actually control a character that you move around in an isometric setting. There are secret locations to be discovered, hidden loot, NPCs with quests, all of which are absolutely incredible by the way. And groves that work a little bit like bonfires. You know, saving spot, fast travel post, enemies respawn, etc. You find crafting materials with which you can craft your own cards. Out of a series of fixed possibilities, that is, don't get too excited. You can edit your deck whenever you want, and you can have several pre-made decks, pretty much like you do in Black Book. You also have talent trees that are specific to the realm that you're in, and totems that work like relics do in Black Book. Initially, you can only equip one, but over the course of the game you find several different, very tactical totems, and you can unlock slots to equip them. And more importantly, if you die, you don't start over from scratch. You can try again the one fight that you couldn't win without having to kill everything that you have already killed up until that point. Combat takes place in a grid, which means that position matters in Howl, and it matters a lot. And not every combat scenario is the same. Using the level design to your advantage often makes the difference between efficacy and efficiency in this game. But what made Howl stand out to me in 2025 was the way in which every mechanic, feature, and design choice blended together into a seamless, cohesive whole that was also deeply embedded in the game's theme and vibe. The spirit world is divided in realms, and each realm has its own aesthetic and its own cast of bad guys. And these bad guys work like a team, and they all seem to follow a strategy that is specific to the realm. The Meadows of Delusion, for example, features enemies like poisonous snails and frogs. Those enemies that have greater mobility will try to assault you relentlessly, not ever letting you get far away enough to avoid their attacks, and slower enemies will leave a trail of acid to leave you nowhere to run to. But the Glacial Maw is an icy location in which you get cold damage every turn, so enemies try to keep their distance, hitting you from afar while the cold chips away at your health. Enemies are definitely the most interesting thing about Howl. They are super varied and super complex, to the point that each of them is a self-contained puzzle that's also a part of a bigger puzzle, which is the enemy group as a whole. But as good as enemies are in this game, it's the bosses that steal the show. These are hands down the best bosses of 2025. They are difficult, they are fun, and story and lore-wise, they feel like larger-than-life entities. I know that it doesn't fit the game thematically, but I would totally play a boss rush mode once or twice all the way through in this game. The least impressive thing about Death Howl is, oddly enough, the cards themselves. Don't get me wrong, they are pretty good, and it's interesting that every realm has its theme. Once you spend enough time in a realm and craft enough realm-specific cards, you get to that moment of,
oh, I get it.
and you start thinking about ways in which your overall realm-specific deck could benefit from a pinch of this or a pinch of that from other realms. But it's impossible not to compare these cards with the ones you have in games like Beneath Oresa, Wild Frost, or Monster Train 2, and come to the conclusion that cards in Death Howl aren't as awesome as the rest of the elements in the game. Again, don't get me wrong, they are still better than in 90% of the games of the genre, because this is one of the best deck builders out there. You craft your cards using materials that you loot from vanquished enemies and that you pick up from the ground as you journey through the realm. So because each realm has its own flora and fauna, the materials that you come by in that realm are specific to that area, and therefore, so are the cards that you can craft with them. You can of course use these cards in other realms, but cards from other realms cost 1 extra energy to use. This encourages you to explore different strategies and build different decks. Realm-specific decks, if you will. There are also different talent trees in the game, and they are also specific to their realms. You unlock talents by spending teardrops, and you get those in exchange for the souls that you collect from the enemies that you vanquish. Souls are also used to craft cards, so there is an interesting situation of opportunity cost attached to this mechanic. Do you invest more heavily in a broader variety of cards, or do you exchange the souls you've collected for teardrops to purchase a skill? Also, I feel like I need to talk about the NPCs and the side quests in this game, because they are some of the best, well, ever. Over the course of her journey, Ro encounters a series of fantastic beings that go from sinister entities that seek to deceive her for their own gain, to noble creatures who have become trapped in a hell of their own making. Each realm in this spirit world has at least one of these beings, and all of them ask Ro to help them out with their predicaments. These are non-mandatory side quests that yield very powerful totems, but it's not the rewards that makes these side quests interesting, but the way in which they are presented, like self-contained fables that have poignant, thought-provoking subtext woven into the fabric of the tale. And some of them can be pretty brutal, let me tell you. Also, gameplay-wise, none of these missions are simplistic fetch quests. They often have a major impact on how you explore the realm, and even on the way you approach combat encounters. They also usually require you to figure out a puzzle. And man, some of them can hit really hard and leave you thinking about the moral of the story for a few minutes after your gaming session. And holy shit, that music, guys. The music in this game, along with the visual, it's something else, I tell you. One of my favorite soundtracks of 2025, and it was up against some pretty stiff competition, I tell you. Death Howl is not perfect, like I said. Cards, while not bad, could have benefited a little bit more from the creativity that clearly went into other aspects of the game. Also, the game could have done a better job explaining what some of the enemies do. The storytelling aspect of the game is not bad, but the wordcraft itself feels a little bit crude at times and a little bit over-explainy. Death Howl doesn't have ascension levels like its most notorious RLDB cousins, which is expected because this game is more comparable to something like Black Book, but you don't get to make story decisions either like you do in Black Book, so there is not much replay value to speak of. And I know this is a very, very, very personal take, but I found the story in this game to be utterly depressing. Death Howl makes your average Steve Wilson album feel like a disco party in the 70s. Every time I accomplished something in this game, rather than throwing a tiny sliver of hope my way to make me feel like I was getting a little bit closer to my goal, the game smacked me in the face with a new revelation that made it abundantly clear that things were fucked and that there was no way to unfuck them. But these are insignificant issues, really. Death Howl is one of the most memorable gaming experiences of the decade so far, and I can't recommend it enough if you are into card battlers or even RPGs. Number 4. SpellRogue. I talked about this game extensively in its own video, link in the description by the way. so I won't be getting into the game's mechanics and features like I did with Death Howl. I'll just restate that if I chose my game of the year based solely on game mechanics, I would probably choose SpellRogue. If this game is not a 10 out of 10, it's pretty damn close. Enemies in this game are some of the best enemies that I've encountered in 2025. Skills are some of the most interesting, synergies are super clever and rewarding, and the strategic aspect of the game is just awesome. The way you can customize your challenge as you take on more difficult descent levels is also brilliant. And all of the game's support systems serve to elevate the core experience, and they don't have any of the things that we usually find annoying in these secondary mechanics. Also, the devs didn't put the 1.0 version out there to rest in their laurels, like the devs of Cyber Knights and some other games that we have not talked about yet. The devs of SpellRogue have continued to listen to their audience, and they have made substantial improvements that include balance adjustments, new music tracks, and even new boss battles. More importantly, this game single-handedly pulverized my bias against this genre and made me go from, I don't know man, to hell yeah, tell me more, whenever I play a new Dice Battler. For a long time, this was my favorite game of 2025, and it still is one of my chosen picks to be in this Mount Rushmore of 2025. Number 3, Monster Train 2. Monster Train 2 is probably one of the best sequels that I have ever played. Holy shit, talk about improving upon its predecessor. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This right here is how you do a sequel. You take everything that your audience loved about the first game, you crank that shit up to 11, and you add new mechanics and features that serve to make what was already good about your game even better. I still have a hard time wrapping my head around all the new things that Monster Train 2 brought to the series. 5 new factions with their own unique philosophy, a bunch of new skills, including skills that you activate arbitrarily, new card types, a boatload of pyres with different skills, new game modes that change the way you play the game completely, bosses with mechanics that bend the rules of the game in ways that I didn't think were possible, and an unexpectedly hilarious story that does not get in the way of the gameplay. The fun factor is also off the charts with this one, and like many of the best titles of the year, the devs continue to add a ton of content, both paid and free, long after the 1.0 version got released. So much so, in fact, that it's actually difficult to keep up with all the stuff they keep adding to the game. As you can see, not many card battlers make it to the top tier of my tier maker ranking list, but within a couple of days of playing this game, I had no doubts that that was where it was going to be. Monster Train 2 is almost interchangeable with the other 2 games that remain on this list. That's how much I liked it, and I see myself throwing more than 100 hours more at it in 2026. Number 2, Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon. Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon didn't rock my world during the early access period, but if there is one good thing that you can say about Awakened Realms, is that these guys listen to their players. They listen to their players and they strive to make their games every bit as good as they can be. Tainted Grail The Fall of Avalon was not only overhauled substantially for the 0.9 version and then again for the 1.0 release, but like many of the very best titles on this list, it has been constantly getting updates, upgrades, and even full-fledged DLCs since its release. Tainted Grail features great combat, rewarding exploration, a great deal of possibilities in terms of builds and tactics, and some of the best itemization that I've seen in a long time. There are also many very interesting self-contained stories, and choices matter a heck of a lot more than they do in similar games. It also nails the look and feel of the Tainted Grail IP, which is rapidly becoming my favorite IP of the decade. The writing itself might have not been as sophisticated as the one we got from its older cousin, Tainted Grail Conquest, but the story is absolutely brilliant. You embark upon Arthur's last journey. He has given you the task to help him become whole again so that he can make the most out of his last chance to make things right. But those who helped you escape your prison cell before you tripped on fate and ended up pulling Arthur out of his have a different plan. They want you to put an end to Arthur's cycle of death and rebirth and give Avalon the reign of its own destiny. You've been thrusted upon greatness, and now there is nothing you can do about it. You will have to step in the king's shoes and make decisions that will impact an entire kingdom. Decisions that feel larger than any human can handle, and that will make you feel small and overwhelmed. You will see how hard it is to be Arthur, and how easy it is to judge him now that the consequences of his actions have become readily obvious. Nowadays, it's not easy for me to sit down and play a game as long as Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon in one go without ever taking a break to play another game in the meantime. But I found this game to be endlessly immersive, incredibly fun to play, and deeply rewarding in every respect. It's amongst those precious few titles that make me feel like we don't have to cling to those IPs that we used to love that have been desecrated beyond recognition. We don't need to hope against hope that they'll once again be the source of excitement and thrill that they used to be, because there is new stuff made for us out there. Great stuff. Stuff like Tainted Grail. Number 1. The Necromancer's Tale. Speaking of new stuff made for old farts like us, the top spot of this list goes to The Necromancer's Tale. This isometric CRPG felt like the game that I had been wanting to play for almost 20 years. The story is gripping, filled with ever-increasing stakes, and it happens as a consequence of your character setting out to get to the bottom of a mystery that's deeply personal to him or her, and coming into conflict with other characters. It goes from something small and personal but very important to an epic world-changing affair that involves very big players. NPCs feel like people who have their own lives and purpose beyond that one thing they want you to help them with and the things that you want from them. Some of these NPCs you actually end up caring about. You join the cause of the ones who want to bring about a change. You try to shield those you love from the consequences of your inevitable descent into darkness. And even after you've reached rock bottom, in one final defiant act of humanity, you can go for one final push to make everything right and try your best to leave the world in a better state than you found it. The game makes a good case for the antagonists of the story. They are not mustache-twirling villains, but people who truly believe that they are doing what's best for the nation. And they do make some interesting points, but more importantly, you are given agency over your character's actions and choices, and said choices matter, and they matter a lot. The game character creation system is brilliant. It lets you play the hand of destiny and choose the events that shaped your character's life, the decisions they made as a child, a teenager, and a young adult, and even the thoughts and reactions to other people's actions and to fortuitous events. So by the end of this character creation process, you get a good idea of what the world and its most important players are like, you get a character that truly is the result of his or her past experiences, and you are thoroughly invested in it. And I find all of this very impressive. The game's world feels bigger than the part you get to see over the course of your adventure, and its history feels much greater than your character's moment in time. It's a colorful world filled with people who come from different cultures and who show different idiosyncrasies, but it doesn't fall into the trap of presenting this blend of cultures like a badly stitched together kilt of multiculturalism that would have felt more out of place in this 1700 setting than a fat Karen at a salad bar. Also, the game respects your intellect to the point that you find yourself constantly thinking about what you would do in your character's place, rather than about what the game expects you to do to progress further. The Necromancer's Tale is a new game with an old soul and a heck of a lot of personality. It's immersive, thought-provoking, gripping, it's player-driven as opposed to story-driven, and its story still wipes the floor with any other story in any other game that came out in 2025. This is the easiest top pick that I have had in a long time, and I can't recommend it enough if you were a fan of Planescape Torment, Arcanum, and all these other timeless classic CRPGs.
And I have nothing more to say to you.
If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs up. If you like what you are seeing on this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. And share the video if you thought it was cool. Bye everyone.
You're excused. You can go back to playing video games.